The massive battlecruiser Eternal Dawn hummed through the darkness of space. Its metal halls stretched for miles in every direction. Inside the main briefing chamber, soldiers from 12 different worlds stood in perfect rows. Their armor gleamed under the bright lights above. Energy weapons hung from their backs and sides. Each piece of equipment looked more advanced than anything Earth had ever created. Lieutenant Commander Taeho walked slowly into the room. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. Unlike the other soldiers, he wore simple gray combat gear. No fancy armor covered his body. No glowing weapons hung from his belt. He looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong meeting. The other soldiers turned to stare at him. Some whispered to each other in their strange languages. Others pointed at his plain appearance. Taeho ignored them all. He found an empty spot near the back wall and stood at attention. Commander Yi-jun stood near the front of the room. He was the only other human present. When he saw Taeho enter, his face showed embarrassment. Yi-jun had spent years building respect among these alien soldiers. Now his fellow human looked like a farmer among warriors. Captain Renho of the Valorian Guard stepped forward. His blue skin shimmered in the light. 4 arms extended from his muscular body. Each hand held a different weapon. Plasma rifles, ion cannons, quantum blasters, all of them hummed with deadly energy. "Brothers in arms," Renho announced. "Today we inspect our weapons before the great mission. Each soldier will display their equipment for approval." The inspection began. One by one, each soldier stepped forward. The Nexari warriors showed their quantum disruptors. These weapons could tear holes in reality itself. The crystalline Veltar beings displayed their built-in photon cannons. Light danced around their transparent bodies like captured lightning. The Corvani soldiers carried gravity hammers that could crush planets. The insectoid Thrix showed off their bioweapons that grew from their own bodies. Each display brought sounds of approval from the crowd. These were weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Then it was Taeho's turn. He stepped forward calmly. The room fell completely silent. Every eye focused on him. Every sensor scanned his body for hidden weapons. They found nothing impressive. Strapped to his right thigh was a simple combat knife. The blade looked like ordinary steel. No energy readings came from it. No technology enhanced its edge. The handle appeared to be made from old leather wrapped around metal. It looked like something a caveman might carry. The silence stretched on. Then someone began to laugh. It started as a small chuckle from a Nexari soldier. Then another joined in. Soon half the room was laughing. The sound echoed off the metal walls like thunder. Captain Renho raised one of his forehands for silence. When the laughter died down, he spoke in his most polite voice. "Human Taeho. Surely this is some kind of mistake. We are about to face the Devourer fleet. These beings consume entire star systems. They eat planets like fruit. You bring a pointed piece of metal?" More laughter filled the room. A Corvani soldier slapped his knee with his massive hand. "Perhaps the humans have not invented real weapons yet?" Sergeant Haye-jin of the Nexari clicked her mandibles together. This made a sound like breaking glass. It was how her species showed amusement. Should we give him one of our spare plasma cutters? He could use it to open food containers. The jokes continued. Each one grew louder than the last. Some soldiers took pictures of Taeho standing there with his simple knife. They would share these images with friends back home. The human who brought a kitchen utensil to a galactic war. Even Commander Yi-jun looked uncomfortable. He had worked hard to prove that humans belonged among these advanced species. Now his fellow human was making them all look primitive. Yi-jun cleared his throat and stepped toward Taeho. "Perhaps you left your real weapon in your quarters?" Yi-jun asked quietly. "This knife might be good for opening ration packs, but surely you have something more suitable for combat?" Taeho remained perfectly still. His face showed no emotion. He had heard every joke and insult. None of them seemed to bother him. His dark eyes stayed focused straight ahead. His weathered hands hung relaxed at his sides. The laughter gradually died down. The other soldiers waited for Taeho to speak. They expected him to explain the mistake. Perhaps he would admit that he was not really a combat soldier. Maybe he was a cook or mechanic who had wandered into the wrong room. Instead, Taeho reached down and touched the knife handle. His fingers traced along something carved into the leather. Nobody else could see what it was. The markings looked like old scratches to them, but Taeho's touch made them shimmer slightly in the light. Captain Renho grew impatient. "Well, human, do you have anything to say about your weapon choice?" Taeho looked up at him. When he spoke, his voice was calm and quiet. "This knife has served me well." The simple answer brought fresh waves of laughter. A Veltar soldier's body flashed with bright colors. This was how their species showed extreme amusement. "Served you well doing what, cutting vegetables?" "Opening packages from home," added a Thrix warrior. "Trimming your fingernails," suggested another. Taeho said nothing more. He stepped back into line and resumed his position. The knife remained at his side, looking as ordinary as ever. The markings on its handle faded back to appearing like simple wear marks. Fleet Admiral Daewon entered the chamber. This ended the weapon inspection. He was an older human with gray hair and tired eyes. He had seen many battles across the galaxy. When he looked at the assembled soldiers, he nodded with approval. "Fine warriors all," Admiral Daewon announced. "You carry the finest weapons in the known galaxy. Tomorrow we face an enemy that threatens every living world. The Devourer fleet must be stopped." The soldiers cheered. Their weapons hummed and glowed with power. They felt confident in their advanced technology. They had plasma that could melt mountains. They had quantum forces that could bend space itself. What could possibly stand against such might? Only Taeho remained quiet. He stood at the back of the room like a shadow. His simple knife showed no lights or energy readings. To everyone else, it looked like the most useless weapon in the entire fleet. But if they had looked more carefully, they might have noticed something strange. The knife cast no shadow on the wall behind Taeho, and when the light hit it, just right, the blade seemed to bend the air around itself like heat waves rising from hot pavement. These small signs meant nothing to the other soldiers. They were too busy admiring their own advanced weapons to pay attention to one human's primitive blade. Soon they would learn that sometimes the most dangerous weapons are the ones that look like nothing at all. Fleet Admiral Daewon walked to the center of the briefing chamber. The holographic display above his head came to life. Images of a dark planet appeared in the air. The world looked dead and broken. Strange lights flickered across its surface, like lightning trapped in glass. "This is Keth Mori," Admiral Daewon announced. His voice carried the weight of many battles. "A rogue planet that travels between star systems. The Devourer fleet has made it their base." The soldiers studied the floating images. The planet's surface showed massive structures that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to exist in several places at once. Reality bent around them like heated metal. Commander Yi Jun stepped forward. "What exactly are they building there, Admiral?" "A temporal manipulation facility," Daewon replied. "The Devourers have learned to weaponize time itself. They plan to erase human colonies from history before we ever develop space travel." Shocked murmurs filled the room. Even the most advanced species had only dreamed of controlling time. The idea of erasing entire civilizations from the past was beyond imagination. Captain Renho raised two of his forearms. "How is such a thing possible? Time cannot be changed. The past is fixed." Admiral Daewon touched a control panel. The holographic display zoomed in on the planet's largest structure. It looked like a twisted cathedral made of crystallized lightning. "The Devourers exist partially outside normal time. They can step between moments like we step between rooms. This facility amplifies that ability." Sergeant Hyojin clicked her mandibles nervously. "If they succeed, humans will never have joined the galactic community. Our alliance with Earth will never have existed." "Worse than that," Daewon said grimly. "Without human innovation, many of our recent victories against other threats would never have happened. The timeline changes could destroy everything we have built." The weight of the mission settled on everyone's shoulders. This was not just another battle. The fate of history itself hung in the balance. A Veltar soldier's crystalline body pulsed with worried colors. How do we fight enemies that can manipulate time? Our weapons are designed for normal space combat. Admiral Daewon brought up new images. These showed the interior of the facility. The hallways twisted in impossible directions. Walls appeared and disappeared like mirages. Gravity seemed to flow like water. The temporal fields will interfere with most energy weapons, he explained. Your plasma rifles may function at reduced capacity. Quantum weapons should maintain some effectiveness, though with unpredictable results. The soldiers examined their equipment with new concern. Weapons that had seemed invincible moments ago now appeared inadequate. How could plasma beams hit targets that existed in multiple times at once? A Corvani warrior hefted his gravity hammer. What about kinetic weapons? Surely physical force will work normally. Physical attacks should be more reliable, Daewon confirmed. But you must remember that Devourer warriors phase between temporal states. They may dodge your strikes by moving to different moments. All eyes turned to Tae-ho again. He stood quietly at the back of the room with his simple knife. The other soldiers realized that his primitive weapon might actually be more useful than their advanced technology. Sergeant Haijin spoke what everyone was thinking. The human's blade might be the most practical weapon we have. At least it will always work the same way. Some soldiers nodded in agreement. Others still looked skeptical. A simple steel knife against beings that could manipulate time seemed like bringing a candle to fight the sun. Admiral Daewon continued the briefing. We will infiltrate through a quantum tunnel. This will bypass their outer defenses but place us directly inside the facility. Once there, you must fight your way to the core chamber. The holographic display showed their route. The path wound through sections of the facility that seemed to exist in different time periods. Some rooms showed ancient architecture. Others displayed technology from possible futures. The facility exists in a temporal flux, Daewon explained. You may encounter the same room at different points in history. Stay focused on your objective. Do not be distracted by what you see. Commander Yi-jun studied the mission parameters. How many Devourer warriors should we expect? Unknown, Daewon admitted. They may have forces from multiple time periods defending the facility. You could face enemies from their past and future simultaneously. The complexity of the mission was overwhelming. Fighting enemies that existed in normal space was challenging enough. Battling foes that could attack from different moments in time seemed impossible. Tae-ho finally spoke from his position at the back. What happens if we destroy the facility? Admiral Daewon looked at him with respect. The temporal disruption should collapse their ability to manipulate history. The timeline will stabilize and their planned changes will be prevented. And if we fail? Asked Captain Renho. Daewon's expression grew dark. Then human civilization will be erased from history. Earth will remain a primitive world. Our alliance will never have existed. Everything we know will simply never have been. The silence that followed was complete. Each soldier understood the stakes now. This was not just a battle for territory or resources. They were fighting to preserve the very existence of their reality. Preparations began immediately. The soldiers checked their equipment again with new urgency. Energy cells were tested and retested. Backup weapons were distributed. Emergency supplies were packed. The Valorian guards synchronized their plasma rifles for maximum efficiency in temporal fields. The Nexari warriors calibrated their quantum disruptors to compensate for time distortions. The Veltar soldiers charged their photon cannons to full capacity. Through it all, Tae-ho sat alone in a corner of the chamber. He had taken out a simple whetstone and was carefully sharpening his knife. Each stroke of the blade across the stone produced a soft ringing sound. The tone seemed to harmonize with the ship's quantum engines in a way that made some soldiers feel uneasy. The Korean characters carved into the knife's handle seemed to glow faintly as he worked, but the light was so subtle that other soldiers dismissed it as reflection from the chamber's bright panels. As Tae-ho worked, he whispered words in his native language. They sounded like a prayer, or perhaps an apology. No one else could understand what he was saying. They assumed he was nervous about the upcoming battle. The preparation continued through the night. Tomorrow they would face an enemy that could rewrite history itself. Their advanced weapons might fail them. Their technology might prove useless. But they had to try. The fate of every human who had ever lived depended on their success. The future of the entire galactic community hung in the balance. And somewhere in the darkness of space, the Devourer fleet waited with powers beyond imagination. Only time would tell if they were ready for what was coming. The quantum tunnel felt like falling through liquid starlight. Tejo and his team moved through the glowing passage toward the Devourer facility. Their bodies tingled as reality shifted around them. Colors that had no names painted the tunnel, walls. Sounds that should not exist echoed in the distance. One by one, the soldiers emerged inside the facility. They found themselves in a vast chamber with impossible architecture. The ceiling stretched up forever while also pressing down on their heads. Walls existed in 3 places at once. Staircases led up and down simultaneously. Captain Renho immediately raised his plasma rifle. "Stay alert. This place hurts to look at." The other soldiers formed a defensive circle. Their advanced sensors gave contradictory readings. Some detected enemies everywhere. Others showed the chamber as completely empty. Reality itself seemed broken here. Commander Yi Jun checked his equipment. "All units report status. How are your weapons functioning?" The responses were not encouraging. The Valorian plasma rifles showed reduced power output. The Nexari quantum disruptors were giving error messages. Even the Veltar photon cannons seemed dimmed by the temporal distortions. Only Tejo remained, calm. He drew his simple knife and held it ready. The blade looked exactly the same as always. No fancy displays or energy readings. Just steel and leather in a place where reality had gone insane. Sergeant Hyojin pointed down a corridor that twisted in directions that should not exist. Movement detected. Multiple contacts approaching. The first Devourer warriors appeared, like shadows given form. They looked wrong in every way possible. Too many angles, too few dimensions. Parts of their bodies existed in different moments, creating a disturbing blur effect. One creature had 3 arms in the past, 5 in the present, and 7 in the future. Another's head flickered between child and ancient elder. They moved, like smoke with purpose, flowing toward the coalition soldiers. Captain Renho opened fire first. His plasma beam shot toward the nearest Devourer. The energy bolt passed through empty air, where the creature had been a moment ago. The warrior had simply stepped sideways through time to avoid the attack. The other soldiers began firing. Plasma beams, quantum bursts, and photon blasts filled the air. Most shots missed their targets completely. The Devourers existed in multiple moments at once, making them nearly impossible to hit. When the energy weapons did connect, they seemed to cause little damage. The temporal distortions scattered the beams. A shot that should have been fatal became merely annoying. The Devourers began their counterattack. They moved between seconds like dancers. One moment they were across the chamber. The next they stood beside coalition soldiers, striking with claws that cut through several time periods at once. A Corvani warrior swung his gravity hammer at a Devourer. The weapon passed through the creature's past form, while its present body struck from behind. The Corvani fell with wounds that had been inflicted before he even swung. Panic began to spread through the team. Their most advanced weapons were useless. Their enemies could attack from any moment they chose. The mission seemed hopeless before it had truly begun. Commander Yi Jun shouted over the chaos, "Fall back. Regroup at the entrance." But as the soldiers tried to retreat, they discovered that the entrance had changed. The quantum tunnel now led to a different room entirely. The facility had shifted around them like a living maze. "We're trapped," Sergeant Hyojin reported. Her voice carried barely controlled fear. More Devourer warriors appeared. These looked even more wrong than the first group. Some had too many eyes scattered across time. Others spoke in voices from different centuries. They advanced on the surrounded coalition forces. That was when Tejo stepped forward. "Stand back," he said quietly. Commander Yi Jun turned to him with desperation. "Your blade can't possibly work any better than our weapons. These things exist outside normal time. Teho didn't answer with words. Instead, he raised his knife and moved toward the nearest devourer. As he walked, something extraordinary began to happen. The blade in his hand started to glow with an inner light that seemed older than stars. The Korean characters carved into the handle blazed with silver fire. The devourer warrior reached out with claws that existed in 3 different moments. Teho swung his knife to block the attack. The blade didn't just parry the claws, it cut through them in all 3 time periods simultaneously. The devourer screamed in voices from past, present, and future as its temporal form was severed. The other soldiers stopped fighting to stare. Teho's simple knife was doing what their advanced weapons could not. It was cutting through time itself. Teho moved like water flowing around stones. His blade traced patterns in the air that left glowing trails. Where the knife passed, temporal distortions parted like curtains. Reality became solid and stable around him. He struck at another devourer that was trying to attack from behind by moving through yesterday. The knife somehow reached into the past and cut the creature down before it could complete its time travel. The warrior collapsed in the present, defeated by a strike that had happened 24 hours ago. The remaining devourers paused in their attack. For creatures that could manipulate time itself, they had never seen anything like this. A primitive weapon that could match their temporal abilities seemed impossible. Teho pressed his advantage. He spun and slashed in a complex pattern. His blade cut lines through the air that glowed like captured lightning. The lines formed a web that trapped 2 devourers in a cage made of crystallized moments. The creatures tried to phase to different time periods to escape. But no matter when they moved, the cage followed them. They were caught in a temporal net that existed in all moments simultaneously. With a final strike, Teho brought his knife down through the center of the cage. The trapped devourers dissolved like shadows touched by sunlight. Their forms scattered across multiple timelines until nothing remained. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of the coalition soldiers breathing heavily. They stared at Teho as he calmly cleaned his blade on a cloth from his pocket. The Korean characters on the handle gradually stopped glowing, returning to their appearance as simple wear marks. Captain Renho lowered his useless plasma rifle. "How is this possible?" Teho sheathed his knife without looking at the other soldiers. "We have a mission to complete." But as he walked toward the corridor leading deeper into the facility, the others noticed something that made them question everything they thought they knew about human technology. The knife had left cuts in the air itself. Thin lines where reality had been sliced open hung in space like invisible wounds. Through these gaps they could glimpse other moments, other possibilities, other times when this battle might have had different outcomes. Sergeant Hai-Jin checked her sensors again. They were reading energy signatures from the knife that shouldn't exist, temporal mathematics written in quantum foam, calculations that solved paradoxes by cutting through them literally. "What exactly is that weapon?" she whispered. Teho paused at the corridor entrance. For a moment, his weathered face showed something that might have been sadness. "Something that should not exist yet," he replied. "But since it does, we might as well use it." He disappeared into the twisted hallway, leaving the other soldiers to follow and wonder what other secrets the human race might be hiding in plain sight. The coalition team moved deeper into the facility, following Teho through corridors that defied logic. Gravity flowed like water down the walls. Doorways led to rooms that existed in different centuries. The air itself seemed thick with compressed time. Teho walked ahead of the group, his knife drawn and ready. The blade continued to glow with soft silver light. Where he stepped, the temporal distortions calmed like troubled water becoming still. Reality became solid around him. Commander Yi-jun hurried to catch up. "Teho, we need to talk. That weapon of yours is not standard human equipment." Teho didn't slow his pace. "No, it is not." "Then what is it? Where did you get it?" "Before." Teho could answer. More devourer warriors emerged from the walls themselves. These looked different from the first group, older, more twisted by their existence outside normal time. Their forms flickered between so many different moments that they appeared as living static. The lead creature spoke in a voice that came from 1,000 different years. The time cutter has come. We wondered when your kind would send one of the blade bearers. Taeho raised his knife. The glowing Korean characters on the handle blazed brighter. You know what this is? We know what it will become, the Devourer replied. In the wars that have not yet been fought. In the future that must not come to pass. The creature lunged forward, moving through 7 different time periods simultaneously. Its claws reached for Taeho from past, present, and future all at once. Taeho responded with a strike that defied physics. His blade moved in a spiral pattern, cutting through each temporal position in sequence. The cuts happened so fast they appeared simultaneous, but each one occurred in precisely the right moment to intercept the Devourer's attack. The creature fell apart like a puzzle being disassembled. Each piece dissolved into a different time period. The ancient warrior was defeated by a blade that somehow existed in all moments at once. The other Devourers backed away. Their temporal forms flickered with what might have been fear. Sergeant Hyjin's sensors were recording everything. Commander, you need to see these readings. That knife is performing calculations with each swing. It's solving temporal equations. In real time. Commander Yijun studied the data streaming across his display. The numbers made no sense. The knife was treating time like a mathematical problem and cutting through the solution. This is impossible, he whispered. No human technology can do this. Taeho finally stopped walking. He turned to face the other soldiers. His expression was tired, like someone carrying a burden too heavy for one person. You want to know what this blade is? He asked. It is a weapon from wars that have not happened yet, from a future where humanity learned to forge time itself into steel. Captain, Renho's 4 arms trembled slightly. Future weapons? How can that be? Time is not a straight line, Taeho explained. It is a web. Sometimes threads from the future reach back to touch the past. Sometimes the past reaches forward to change what will come. He held up the knife so they could all see it clearly. In the temporal distortions of the facility, its true nature became visible. The blade was not simply made of steel. It was forged from crystallized moments. Each fold in the metal contained compressed time. Each edge held the memory of cuts, not yet made. This blade was made by humans from a timeline where we discovered how to weaponize causality itself, Taeho continued. They sent it back to prevent the very future that created it. The Korean characters on the handle were not just decorative. They were equations written in Hangul, mathematical formulas that described how to cut through the fabric of time itself. Each symbol contained instructions for slicing reality. But how can a future that doesn't exist send weapons to the past? Asked Sergeant Hyjin. Because the Devourers made it exist, Taeho replied. By trying to erase humanity from history, they created a paradox. In fighting them, we will eventually learn to make weapons like this one. The terrible logic of the situation became clear. The Devourers were trying to prevent humanity from developing temporal weapons, but their attack on human history was what would force humanity to develop those weapons in the first place. It's a causal loop, Commander Yijun realized. They created the very future they're trying to prevent. Taeho nodded grimly. And I am caught in the middle. A soldier from your time carrying a weapon from tomorrow, fighting enemies from outside time entirely. More Devourer warriors appeared, but these behaved differently. They did not attack immediately. Instead, they circled the coalition team like predators studying their prey. The largest one spoke in a voice that echoed from multiple centuries. You cannot change what must be. We have seen the time wars. We have watched your species learn to cut reality itself. You will make weapons from the bones of paradox. Then you know why we must stop you, Taeho replied. If you succeed in erasing humanity, the timeline will collapse, everything will unravel. Better that than allow your kind to poison causality itself, the Devourer responded. You will teach other species to fight time. You will turn the universe into a battlefield where past and future collide. Taeho considered this. The Devourers had a point. If humanity learned to weaponize time, it could destroy the natural order of existence. But if they were erased from history, countless other species would fall to threats that only humans could face. "There has to be another way," he said. "There is no other way," the Devourer replied. "We have seen all possible futures. In every timeline where humanity survives, you become the time cutters. You spread the infection of temporal warfare across the galaxy." The circle of Devourers began to close in. Their forms flickered between different time periods, making them difficult to track. They were preparing for a final assault. Taeho raised his knife. The blade burst into brilliant silver flame. The Korean equations blazed with light that hurt to look at directly. He was preparing to fight, but his expression showed regret. "Then I will carry this burden," he said quietly. "I will be the time cutter so that others do not have to be." The other soldiers watched in stunned silence as Taeho prepared to face enemies from outside time itself. They finally understood what they were witnessing. Not just a battle between different species, but a fight to determine the very nature of causality. Captain Renho slowly lowered his plasma rifle. "What can we do to help?" Taeho looked at him with something that might have been gratitude. "Stay alive. Complete the mission. And never ask me to explain how this blade really works." The Devourers attacked in a wave of temporal distortion. They came from multiple time periods at once, their forms bleeding through different moments like ink through water. Taeho met them with his impossible weapon. The knife cut through their assault in patterns that existed in all timelines simultaneously. Each strike was both the first and last blow of a battle that spanned centuries. The other soldiers could only watch as their human comrade fought enemies that existed outside the normal flow of time. His blade left trails of light that wrote equations in the air. Mathematics made visible. Temporal formulas carved into reality itself. And somewhere in the depths of the facility, the Devourer's main weapon continued to charge. A device that could erase humanity from history was almost ready to fire. Time was running out in more ways than one. The final chamber stretched beyond the limits of normal space. Crystalline towers reached toward a ceiling that existed in multiple dimensions. Energy flowed through transparent tubes like liquid starlight. At the center of it all stood the temporal manipulation device that could erase civilizations from history. The machine was beautiful and terrible to behold. It looked like a cathedral built from frozen time itself. Spires of crystallized moments reached upward while foundations of compressed causality anchored it to reality. The whole structure pulsed with the rhythm of a cosmic heartbeat. Taeho and the coalition team stood at the chamber's entrance. Their weapons felt small and inadequate compared to the power before them. Even the advanced energy rifles seemed like toys next to a device that could rewrite existence itself. "How do we destroy something that big?" Captain Renho whispered. "Commander," Yijun checked his scanners. "The power readings are off the scale. That machine is drawing energy from the time stream itself." Sergeant Hae-jin pointed to the base of the device. "There. I see Devourer technicians working on the final preparations. They're almost ready to activate it." The technicians moved in the jerky, disturbing way of beings that existed partially outside normal time. Their forms flickered between different moments as they made last-minute adjustments to their reality-destroying weapon. Suddenly, the air in the chamber changed. A presence that felt older than galaxies filled the space. The coalition soldiers felt their minds struggling to comprehend what approached. The Devourer commander emerged from the machine itself. It was not a single being, but a collection of possibilities. Past and future versions of itself occupied the same space, creating a constantly shifting constellation of forms. When it spoke, voices from a million different timelines spoke as one. "So the time cutter has come to us at last," the entity said. "We wondered when your handlers would send you to complete the cycle." Taeho stepped forward, his knife already drawn. The blade glowed with steady silver light. "I'm here to stop you from erasing humanity. You are here because you must be here," the commander replied. "We have seen this moment played out across countless timelines. You will fight us. You will win or lose according to the laws of causality. Either way, the cycle continues." Other soldiers spread out, trying to find positions where their weapons might be useful. But in this chamber where time moved like honey, their advanced technology felt clumsy and slow. "What cycle?" Commander Yi-jun demanded. The Devourer commander's form shifted to show different possible answers. "The cycle of temporal warfare. We try to prevent your species from becoming time cutters. Our actions force you to develop temporal weapons. Those weapons create the future we are trying to prevent." Taeho understood the horrible truth. "You're not trying to destroy humanity. You're trying to break the causal loop that created the Time Wars." "Yes," the commander confirmed. "But we have learned that the loop cannot be broken. Every attempt to change the outcome only ensures that it happens exactly as foreseen." The temporal manipulation device began to hum with increasing power. Energy flowed through its crystalline structure like blood through veins. The machine was almost ready to fire. "Then why continue?" Taeho asked. "If you know you cannot change the outcome, why keep fighting?" "Because we must," the commander replied sadly. "We are trapped in the same loop as you. Our nature compels us to try stopping you, just as your nature compels you to fight us." The machine's humming reached a crescendo. Warning lights flashed across its surface. Somewhere deep in its crystalline heart, the targeting system was locking onto human settlements across time. "It's charging the main weapon," Sergeant Hai-jin reported. "Energy levels are approaching critical mass." Taeho realized there was no more time for talk. He raised his knife and rushed toward the Devourer commander. The blade left a trail of silver fire as he moved. The commander met his attack with weapons, made of crystallized time, swords that had been forged from the moment of creation itself. When the blades met, reality cracked around them like breaking glass. The fight that followed could not be fully described in normal terms. They battled across multiple time periods simultaneously. Taeho struck at the commander's past while dodging attacks from its future. The Korean equations on his knife blazed with mathematical fire as they calculated the perfect moment for each cut. The other coalition soldiers tried to help, but their weapons could barely function in the temporal storm. Surrounding the duel, plasma beams bent through time like light through water. Quantum bursts scattered across multiple dimensions. Only Captain Renho managed to make any difference. His gravity hammer, being a purely physical weapon, could affect the machine's crystalline structure. He began striking at the device's base, trying to damage the power conduits. The Devourer commander noticed the attack and tried to stop him, but Taeho pressed his assault, forcing the entity to focus on their duel. "You cannot change anything," the commander said as their blades locked together. "Even if you destroy this machine, others will take our place. The cycle will continue." Taeho smiled grimly. "Maybe. But I can make sure humanity survives long enough to face that future." He pulled back his knife and struck with a technique that should have been impossible. The blade cut through the commander's form in all time periods simultaneously. Past, present, and future versions of the entity fell as one. But as the commander dissolved, it spoke one last time. "You do not understand. This is not the end. This is the beginning. You have just taken the first step toward becoming exactly what we tried to prevent." The words hit Taeho like a physical blow. He realized the terrible truth. By using the temporal blade to defeat the Devourers, he was proving their point. Humanity was already on the path to becoming the Time Cutters. The temporal manipulation device began to overload. Captain Renho's attacks had damaged critical systems. Energy was building to dangerous levels throughout the crystalline structure. "Everyone out," Taeho shouted. "The whole facility is going to collapse." But as the others ran for the exit, Taeho remained behind. He raised his knife and prepared for one final cut. "What are you doing?" Commander Yi-jun called back to him. "Something. That should not be possible," Taeho replied. "I'm going to cut the causal loop itself." He brought his blade down through the center of the overloading machine. But instead of simply destroying it, he cut through the timeline that had created it. The knife severed the causal connections that linked past and future together. The facility didn't just explode. It unraveled across multiple time periods. The machine that would have erased humanity from history was itself erased from history. The Devourer's plan had never existed. The cycle was broken. When the coalition team found themselves back aboard the Eternal Dawn, they remembered the mission differently. They had infiltrated a devourer base and destroyed a dangerous weapon, but none of them could recall exactly what that weapon had been designed to do. Only Tae-ho remembered the truth. And when they asked him about his knife, he simply smiled and strapped it back to his thigh. "Just a family heirloom," he said. "Nothing special." But as he walked away, the other soldiers noticed something odd. The knife cast two shadows on the wall behind him. One showed the blade as it appeared now. The other showed it as it might become in a future that would never happen. The temporal wars had been prevented. The causal loop was broken. And somewhere in the depths of space, humanity continued its journey toward a future that was no longer predetermined. Tae-ho had cut through time itself to save not just his species, but causality itself. And if that made him the very thing the devourers had feared, then perhaps some fears were worth proving true. After all, sometimes the most dangerous weapons are the ones that look like nothing at all.